Hey there, Rednecks, Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. How you doing today? Great? Good. So we're back at the range on a very hot day. If I look sweaty, my apologies, but it's like 6,000 degrees Celsius here, and what is that, like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit? It's hot, so I'm going to be a little clammy during this video, and I apologize for that. At any rate, we're back with the latest in the WK180-C by Kodiak Defence series of reviews, this being the 500 round mark. Now, if you haven't seen the first video, there is a link up above right now, or you can find a link in the description below, which will help you get up to speed as to where we are in this. Now, before we begin with the rifle and the review, I do need to make one correction from the first video. I asserted at the time that there were some quality control issues with the first generation of the rifle, something that the company won't deny, but I was wrong when I said that it was some bolt faces had deformed during firing. That is absolutely not the case, and I apologize to Kodiak Defence for stating that. What actually happened was the issue was with the bolt carriers. Now, during the heat treating process, the company had initially added nitriding to it, and that actually ended up making the bolt carriers, at least some of them, a little brittle. And what happened was during firing, the bolt carrier would fail right around where the guide holes are for the rods. As of May 2019, there were 7 such failures. I don't know if there are any more. I just know of 7. Those that were nitrided, if they were sent to the company and presumably continues, they will replace with a bolt carrier that has not been nitrided, only heat treated. Not a huge point, but I try and get my facts straight when I do this stuff. At any rate, before we get to the review itself, I just wanted to spotlight some changes that I made to the rifle to address some things that I didn't particularly care for. The first one is I added a aftermarket bolt charging handle to it, courtesy of a Canadian company whose name I do not remember, but they didn't send it to me for free, so it's not like they're going to get a free plug. This bolt charging handle purports to be stronger, and it certainly is larger, so that it helps gain in purchase when you're cycling the rifle, which is useful, let's say, if you're in a 3-gun competition or something. The thing that I don't like about it is that it does still screw into the bolt carrier assembly, so at some point it could also work itself loose and kind of have that issue that I had with the OEM one, where it would actually just come loose and I'd have to tighten it every now and then. I talked to the manufacturer of the charging handle, and they said that they recommended using blue Loctite on it. That'll work, but it would be kind of a pain in the ass then to remove that handle when you wanted to field strip and clean the rifle. So it is what it is, pluses, minuses as always. The second is that I decided to pay the mag pull tax, and I added an M-LOK quick detach sling point to the front of the rifle. I was perfectly happy with my redneck solution of using some paracord just to tie the sling onto the front handguard. But then I kind of realized that at a certain point, if the barrel got really hot during extended firing periods, that paracord could literally burn itself onto the barrel, which would kind of be a pain in the ass to clean off. So I decided to just do it the right way and get an actual real sling attachment point. And at any rate, on to the review. So obviously the 500 round mark isn't an exhaustive test for a rifle, but that said, there are plenty of firearms in recent years that couldn't even get through their first magazine, let alone 500 yards. So keep in mind that my thoughts can't be a comprehensive judgment on the WK180-C at this point, just what I've observed so far. At any rate, let's review some of the good things and bad things that I've experienced. Okay, let's start with the good. I've experienced no failures to feed that weren't directly magazine related. It doesn't like the Beowulf magazines that I have, but it seems to work just fine with every AR-15 magazine that I've thrown at it. I don't have a huge reference library of magazines, so I can't say with authority that every magazine would function properly, but I've thrown some polymers and metal magazines, cheap and pricey, and they've all functioned properly. Now, I do have one magazine that requires a tap to ensure that it seats properly and the bolt can then subsequently pick up a round, but it's the only one that had any issues. All of my others work just fine. I also have not seen a single failure to extract. Now, in terms of accuracy, the rifle in my hand seems to be about 2 MOA, though probably less. I'm still playing around with loads and powders, so I don't think I've maximized this rifle's capabilities, but it's reasonably accurate for what it is. Now, both times I took it out to the range for legitimate shooting of groups and testing hand loads, it was, of course, ferociously hot, which took me out of the best shooting that I could manage. I think with tuned reloads in a day where I'm on, and it's not like 500 degrees Celsius, going below 2 MOA wouldn't be an issue. At any rate, still working on seeing what this rifle can do. My primary variable that I'm experimenting with is which powder and what load. I'm happy with the primer, cases, and bullets that I'm using. Another useful evaluation of firearms is, of course, controllability, but I'm not entirely sure how germane it would be to the WK180-C, since it's a semi-automatic rifle that's chambered in .223 Remington, hardly a caliber of ferocious recoil, as you can see by the footage on screen. That said, so far, follow-up shots haven't been an issue, as the rifle is heavy enough at 7.25 pounds, or 3.28 kilograms, to eat up any recoil and allow you to remain on target. Now, as for reliability, I have no complaints. The rifle hasn't failed in functioning over the first 500 rounds of my ownership. It seems to have been manufactured to a reasonably good standard, and it shows in its functioning. No parts failures, though as I have stated, I have made some modifications to this rifle, which included an aftermarket trigger and charging handle. So keep that in mind when you consider my opinions on reliability. About the only issue that I'm experiencing is that the trigger pins have been walking out a little during firing, but that's actually due entirely to the aftermarket trigger I'm using. It has nothing to do with the pins themselves or the rifle. I'm probably going to address that issue with aftermarket anti-walk trigger pins. Okay, and now the downsides of this rifle. I'm going to be honest with you, I had to work really hard to think of negatives. First, this rifle can get a little toasty on the forward stock after extended firing, and I'm talking 80 to 100 rounds in the space of about an hour, which was a bit surprising given that the barrel is free-floated and doesn't actually make any contact with it. I'm guessing the heat actually came from just forward of the chamber, which does, and it gradually radiated along its length, which is why I experienced it. Perhaps also heat radiated off the barrel as well and heated that forward stock. Either way, I did notice it, and it made shooting a little uncomfortable. The stock trigger, which has since been replaced by a Trigger Tech aftermarket trigger, it's your typical AR-15 trigger, which means it's not the worst thing I ever seen, but not a great trigger regardless. If you're using this rifle in 2 or 3 gun competition, you probably won't care too much, but if you're trying to squeeze this rifle into some occasional bench shooting, you will dislike that trigger fairly quickly. Okay, so as I noted in the first video, the stock charging handle is relatively small, which is why I replaced mine with an aftermarket handle. Also, the lack of a bolt release isn't a make or break, but I really do wish Kodiak Defence had included one. They do sell a part, one that I think costs far too much, which offers this functionality, and I wish it came standard with the rifle. It would have been a nice value add to a rifle that carries a chunky price tag, and people in 2 and 3 gun competitions likely would have really appreciated that out-of-the-box feature. Finally, this might be a bit nitpicky, but I wish Kodiak had cribbed parts of the takedown process from AR-15s. Specifically, the forward hinge pin, or pivot pin, whichever you prefer, that joins the upper and lower together
at the front. It's a pin that's held in place with a small retaining ring. And if you want to completely remove the upper from the lower, you have to first remove this tiny retaining pin, which is something like 0.17 inches in size, to remove the pin. It's a pain in the rear, and that ring is pretty easy to lose and possibly break when it's removed. I don't know why Kodiak didn't employ a captive pin here. So there you are, your pluses and minuses to date. The negatives seem to last as long during this video as the positives, but honestly most of them are pretty minor. The only thing that truly bothered me was that retaining ring thing at the pivot pin. Look, I expect barrels and forestocks to get hot, air triggers to suck, and rifle designs that didn't originally have a bolt release not to have them today, so I'm not really disappointed by that stuff. But I also expect captive pins where it makes sense. On the whole, I am quite happy with this rifle so far. I'm finding it to be a reliable, accurate, and fun rifle. Now, I don't say this about a lot of rifles, but I actually look forward to taking the WK180-C out for some range therapy. Now, are there some things that I would change at this point? Sure, but I've never found the perfect rifle yet, so I'm not going to hold this one to an unfair standard. At the 500 round point, I'd answer the question, would I buy this rifle again? With a strong yes. Now, could this change going forward? Only way to find out is to keep on keeping on.
At any rate, I hope you found this latest review of the Kodiak Defence WK180-C rifle to at least be somewhat informative and entertaining. We aren't done yet with this rifle because we are eventually going to get to the 1,000 round mark with this, at least the 1,000 round. So stay tuned for future episodes in this series. As always, I hope you have yourself a great day. May all of your shots ring true, and take care. Bye-bye.